Montague, for our Christian audience, let's talk about using the Bible and the scriptures to do critical storytelling. Is there a natural connection there that you've seen and experienced?
Mhm. Yeah. I've been a part of various groups in which young people come around particular passages, whether looking at experiences with uh, like ethnic or like cultural difference within scriptural texts, or the experiences of women within scriptural texts, and coming together specifically to highlight different stories along the way and then bring one's own story. To do that well, you really do have to cultivate like a community that's going to trust each other with each other's stories. This is not to do that very well. You can't start off that way. Uh, Perhaps it can be modeled to a certain degree, but when you dig into stories that get at some of our toughest experiences, it can't we can't engage those as like, okay, great example. Next, sometimes those lead to stories that were never told before. I mean, if you were to uh, look at the way sexism plays out within different stories within scripture. I mean, look at David and Bathsheba, right? That story is often told in a particular lens that makes it seem like uh, David just happened to be looking at someone on a roof. But when you interrogate it, it's like actually David was on the roof and David was doing some strange looking. And what happens next is not just like it's not really a romantic relationship, you know. You go that route in a story circle, that's going to connect with what a lot of people are thinking about, what society has been wrestling with. Um, but it's not going to be a quick conversation, and you can't just engage those stories uh, in just like a quick way. You have to really prepare well. I mean, the reality is that if we engage scripture well, quite a few stories require trigger warnings, you know, uh, but perhaps as a way of like avoiding that, so many scriptural passages are, glazed over in a way to make it seem like it has a nice little ribbon and a bow. And it's like, here's the lesson. Well, sometimes,
15 minutes or less, please.
yes, exactly.
Mhm.
Yeah. Well, some of these stories, they take some
Yeah.
deep attention. And when we give it deep attention, it connects with some of our deepest stories.
Yeah. And sometimes those can, I mean, I don't know, and maybe you can wonder with me on this. Do they ever, does critical storytelling ever find itself in a space that goes too far? Where people are triggered, or where there is pain that is brought up, right? Whether from past experiences or imagined experiences for going forward. When we get into the deep reaches of storytelling and empathy, and um, that there's that there are a lot of deep feelings there for youth
Mhm,
too, who are
mhm,
still working through how to synthesize all of these things in their beings. So
mhm,
um yeah, yeah, there's a tenderness and an intentionality that really needs to be held, that these are brave spaces and safe spaces that need to be held carefully. I'm getting the
mhm,
sense that's really
mhm.
important.
Yeah. I mean, let's say you get into the story of the Samaritan on the side of the road. I mean, quick interrogation of that. We call that the story of the Good Samaritan. Nowhere in the passage is the Samaritan described that way, right? So this passage is lifted up and it's become part of our social framework for how we think of people who go out of the way to help someone else. and we use that language, good Samaritan, good Samaritan. Well, what's so strange about that is the reason why we tend to call that Samaritan the good Samaritan is on the assumption that Samaritans start out at a place of not being good. That this Samaritan is strangely good. But really at the heart of that passage is Jesus saying, hey, you all are wrong about Samaritans, right? So if you dig into that and you dig into what is happening in this story, what we understand today is racialization. You understand what's going on in that story. That's going to bring up some other things, like who gets followed in a convenience store, It's going to bring up ideas of self-understanding, of why some in society, young people of color, are given so many messages of not being good, needing to achieve a particular form of life shaped by whiteness, and how that happens. I mean, you can get into those stories in a deep way, but you don't want to have people facilitating those conversations who haven't already done their own deep work. Otherwise, now young people are misused as just a place for someone to either dump their feelings or be angry about what they're hearing. It's not fair.
Or worse, the people of color in the room specifically pinpointed for seeking answers or insights on these things, when that's grossly unfair to do, especially to youth, but really to anybody. So naming the work that we all have to do, and the fact that this is holy work and this is hard, and better do your prep work yourself, both your head prep work, but your heart work, to know what you're bringing to that space.
And for leaders, it's, yes, yourself in one sense, but for leaders, it also requires a community. Leaders need to do this in community, but leaders can't rely on young people to do this work for them, or to be the space where they do this work. And this is really what makes this youth work, youth ministry. I mean, there's a guidance. You're meeting young people where they are, but you're not there for the same thing that they're there for. I mean, young people show up, and young people in youth ministry settings, they want to be guided well.
Yeah.